All right, guys, so we're talking about Loki today, and I want to kick it off with area that I haven't seen many people talking about, but I think Loki will actually be very, very good for players who are actually struggling with this, which is wave progression and content, which could be Centranos, could be Faction Wars, could be Dungeons, could be whatever has waves that you're struggling with. Loki could go in there, even Faction Wars. Now, he doesn't have to be 60 to do that. He could be level 50. He can't have War Master or a banner if he's only level 50, but he can still do what he just did, which is place block active skills as well as block buffs. Now, if you don't know what block active skills does, it only allows the champions to use their A1 abilities as well as their passives. So assuming there's no like Doom Priest or Tuhana Rock cleansing from their passives, you're gonna keep the enemies locked out basically forever, which is amazing because now if you have actually dungeon champions working through these waves, you really have no risk of dying. Of course, assuming you bring more than just Loki here, you're gonna be okay, which is absolutely incredible for Centrano potential stuff in the future, for Faction Wars, for Dungeons, for Doom Tower. He's basically, in some ways, very similar to Armand's, honestly, because Armand's is A2, steals turn meter, places a stun. Instead, Loki is placing block actives and block buffs, essentially locking the champions down in a very, very similar way. Now for Spider, stage 20, he could be even more useful because on stage 20 Spider, he's gonna take all of the turn meter. So what we do with the A3 ability, we use it on the Spider. This ability steals turn meter, and yeah, we steal turn meter, can't be resisted, that turn meter's mine, I get another turn. Now, this isn't as effective because it's just spreading block buffs. You'd have to target little spiderlings. That's kind of useless, but the turn meter steal is very, very valuable. So the A2, block buffs, block active skills, paired with the A1, extending the duration of those debuffs, makes for a very powerful wave control champion that I honestly was underestimating at first, but after seeing that, it's awesome. Now, let's talk about Hydra, do some arena, talk about his build. All right, guys, so I built a team around our champion Loki. So you'll notice a few different things. One, he has Cruelty. Also, the team around him, we have Rector Drath. I don't typically use Rector Drath, but for this example, I didn't want to use Duchess. Loki brings an increased attack. Mikage has increased attack. Duchess is a legendary, and I want it to be, I guess, a little more relatable. Now, I am on a test server. Let me add that little icon. There we go. We're good now. But in this fight, you'll notice several things. One, we have pretty long debuff durations. That's because Loki's A1 ability has a chance to extend the duration of debuffs. His A2 ability is going to place a block buffs and a block active skills, and if he has a Veil or Perfect Veil, which is what Rector Drath is giving him, then he's gonna spread 2 debuffs. Let me go ahead and click his ability. Once we get back to it, you'll notice he didn't spread anything just then because he had no Veil or Perfect Veil, which is a pretty big negative for Loki. Because a lot of his stuff relies on a Veil or Perfect Veil, his passive is only giving him that buff at the beginning of a round. And since Hydra is just one long round, you're really only going to get the Veil at the very beginning, so you're forced to bring in another option for Veil unless you want to just manual it. You could cast Loki's A2 ability on himself, his A2 on himself, giving himself a Veil, but that's just a little bit weird, and I'm not a fan personally of manualing Hydra whatsoever. But this A2 ability, like I said, has a chance of taking... But this A2 ability, like I mentioned, says if the champion using the skills under Veil or Perfect Veil also applies a debuff spread effect, taking 2 random debuffs from the target and placing them on all enemies. Now, if you're doing a run where you have a burn, decreased attack, decreased defense, weaken, block buffs, all this kind of stuff, it's going to take 2 random debuffs. Not necessarily 2 random debuffs that aren't on anybody else, just 2 random debuffs. It could take decreased attack and Hex and spread it to everybody. Everybody could already have those debuffs. So the best case scenario, if you're using him as your only block buff champion, is for him to spread block buffs, right? But that's not how it's always going to happen. Having HP burn spreading is also sweet as well. But let's see right now. Leaving it on auto, he's going to get back around to his turn eventually. So here we go. We have the A2 ability being prioritized, but if he uses this right now, it's not going to do anything. Just for the sake of the video, I'm actually going to use this and just boost the turn meter of everybody, essentially give myself increased attack as well, and then hopefully Rector Drath can place a new Veil on everyone. I have Mikage in here for more uses from Loki's A1 ability to increase the debuff duration even further, plus for her A2 skill, which is going to increase buff duration. hopefully helping keep up the Veil a little bit longer. Now, he still has no Veil, unfortunately. I want to do it one more time so we can actually see the debuffs getting spread and see what may or may not be spread. So if we ever get back around to getting a Veil up, we're going to hopefully keep it for a little bit longer. Also, of course, Veil is very good against the Head of Torment, so we don't need Inquisitor Shamel or nothing like that. After this, okay, so the issue with Rector Drath is she places Perfect Veil buff for 2 turns on all allies with full HP, and then places continuous heal on allies with less than 100% HP, which is a pretty big issue when you don't have full HP, but you want Veil. There's a pretty big issue with Rector Drath there. It's going to be a little bit harder to place that consistent Veil. So we're going to target this head right here, the Head of Poison, Head of Blight. So we have HP burn, decrease attack, weaken, and decrease defense. We're going to place a block buffs on there and see what else gets spread to everyone else. So we have block buff spread, block buff spread, block buffs. That's fantastic. That's like the best case scenario. That's not necessarily always going to happen though. As far as my experience, it could be block buffs getting spread, or it could be HP burns or random other debuffs getting spread. So we're going to try this once again to see if block buffs get spread. This head has block buffs, poison sensitivity, and decrease attack. But what all gets spread? It should be a block buffs, right? But we're going to find out. So it does not always spread the block buffs. We have a poison sensitivity and decrease attack. The block buffs may have not been spread because it wasn't placed, but block buffs was already there. So it's not a guarantee that it will spread. Now, if he's the one who applies it, maybe it's a higher chance of it getting spread. In these fights, you're of course going to want to keep block buffs up as much as you possibly can, but you're also going to want to keep up the Veil as much as you can. So when building Hydra teams around Loki, you got to be mindful of those few different things. Now, with Loki, I think having an ally attack champion, possibly a counterattack champion, having revenge accessories, retaliation artifacts, having a Veil champion, these things are all very, very helpful. The Veil champion being basically required. Now, in this team, we have Mikage, who synergizes great with Michinaki, but also Ninja, as well as Oboro. We have decreased attack from 2 champions down here, decreased defense and weaken from Lydia, and then a res champion from Rector Drath. So this is actually a pretty good team. Honestly, it could do quite a bit of damage full auto on Brutal Hydra. So if you have these champions, you could have a potential team option. To be fair, if you have these champions, and instead of Loki, you had Ugo in here, it's probably not going to be a huge difference. If you had Sun Wukong in place of Loki, probably not going to be a huge difference. But Loki is bringing a legitimate benefit to this team. The AoE skill that he's using is increasing the debuff duration, but he's also in a set that allows him to bring a little bit more utility. Now, I personally think Hex or Cursed is the best for Loki, but I notice a bit better control when I put him into a Provoke set. Now, when we take a look at his skills, this A1 ability has a 30% chance, books up to 50% chance of increasing duration of all enemy debuffs by 1 turn, which is what I was talking about. Boosts up to a 70% chance when booked and under Veil or Perfect Veil. It's a solid A1 skill. Very strong, honestly. His A2 ability, you already saw it in use. Basically, if he's under Veil or Perfect Veil, he's going to place block buffs as well as block active skills. Block active skills can't be placed on Hydra, though. But then, if he's under Veil or Perfect Veil, he's going to spread it. If he targets himself or an ally, he's going to place a Veil on that champion and then do a buff spread instead. So a strong A2 with some pretty specific requirements that may not make it super easy to hit on full auto, which may make it to where you have to use manual in Hydra. And I personally don't like to manual Hydra really at all. And then his A3 skill has a 100% chance when booked of stealing all buffs from a target enemy and 100% of their turn meter. So a chance at being sheeped, but also a turn meter steal. These effects cannot be resisted if under Veil or Perfect Veil. Now his passive has him starting with Perfect Veil at the beginning of a round for 2 turns. That's great. So he's going to be able to, in the arena, start with Perfect Veil or Veil and steal turn meter and can't be resisted. That's fantastic. If the target's turn meter was not stolen, against Stone Skin, for example, fills the turn meter of all allies by 15% instead. Also places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. And then his passive, it's pretty long, but essentially he starts with Perfect Veil. If he drops below 50%, he gets Perfect Veil. And then he has a 15% chance to evade. If he's under Veil or Perfect Veil, the evade chance boosts to 30% chance. And then the active effect is if this champion's HP is below 50%, when targeted by an enemy skill, has a 100% chance to evade that skill and all of its accompanying effects. This guaranteed evade then goes on cooldown. So he's a can be a very difficult champion to kill. He has a solid enough kit that it could make sense for some players. But if you're somebody looking at him thinking, okay, well, first up, what blessing do we use, okay? I think Cruelty is great for Hydra. I think Temporal Chains could make a lot of sense. I think Polymorph and Brimstone could also make a lot of sense. Now, when we look at him in the arena, I think you're going to use a build for him very similar to what you would use for Armons, honestly. Now, I'm not going to be going and using the Cruelty Blessing for the arena and in an ideal world, but if you're very limited on resources, then maybe you have to do that. You'll see that actually, let me show you what set I had on previously. It was a Provoke set. I think it was basically this one, but we're going for speed and accuracy. Some HP is good for his A2 ability if you want to go for the heal, but mainly just speed and accuracy. So speed, accuracy, you're good. Skills, so we have Blessing for Hydra, Cruelty. It's actually really good for the A1 ability, and you're going to be able to get him to 5 stars anyways, so that's going to boost your Hydra damage up quite a bit. For Masters, we have War Master, some debuff extension, and some Terminator boosting whenever debuffs fall off. So kind of a typical Mastery setup. The Life Drinker could be very solid as well, potentially. But whenever I want to go into the arena with him, I think I'm going to favor Stone Skin over the other sets. But if you're using him in one place, try to use him in the place or try to build him in the way that the set makes the most sense in both areas. For example, Stone Skin for Hydra plus Arena, or Provoke for Hydra plus Arena. Well, I'm going to go Provoke because Provoke brings so much more value for the Hydra, not so much for the Arena, but it's still usable in the Arena. Whereas Stone Skin and Hydra, well, we don't really need that. But for this example, we're not even going to change the masteries. The blessings, I would go Polymorph, but Polymorph is a consistent, highly disrupting blessing. Use Mikage this time to maybe strip something from someone. And then she can ally attack as well. She's definitely faster than Loki this time, I think. I think she is. Maybe she's not. So, Stone Skin everywhere, it's going to do nothing, basically. But I could try to steal from anybody. Let's try to steal it from Freya. Doesn't steal it, unfortunately. Mikage switches forms. We're going to strip. Also, doesn't strip it for anybody. We'll stun the Harima, though, to maybe get something going here. A strip on the Freya, which is fantastic. Even though... Okay, there we go. Here we go. We're making some progress here. Let's put this on the champion who doesn't have Polymorph. On Freya. So they all have block actives and block buffs. So now we're looking at a pretty good spot. Granted, we could have been risking getting Polymorph there, but that's a chance you take entering into the arena, basically. And now Array comes in for the big nuke. Freya's still locked out. We have the A1 extension. Necrit already cycled through his stuff, unfortunately. But Mikage, we're just going to switch her back into this form. And... as long as we keep extending this stuff, they're just going to stay on the block actives, right? So 3 turns there, 3 turns there. Harima's not as scary with block actives and stuff. Not really sure how hers fell off, but it did fall off. I don't know how. It's okay, though. Maybe some damage taken, dropped a debuff or something. So we're just extending Freya's block active. So she's basically useless. This is basically a lockout skill because they can't cleanse. And they can't place a debuff, so we're looking pretty good in that spot. Granted, we died. We lost our champs, but you get the idea. Having that lockout and having that just extension of that block active skills is very strong. And now we're just evading stuff, which is pretty sweet as well. So I will... let's just keep using the A1, I guess. See how much more we can evade. Actually, let's just spread some debuffs. Just kidding, we can't because it's attacking one person. It's not spreading anything because we don't have the Veil on. We did Polymorph too. So he's kind of doing his thing, right? He's kind of working some stuff out. We'll steal Harima's Terminator. We're actually going to place the Veil back on myself. Even though you'll see the issue in just a moment of placing Veil on myself is the fact that now it's one turn. I can't use any skills. So not the best situation in the world. We use that. He ignores damage. It's on cooldown now though, unfortunately. But I will steal the Terminator. Fantastic. And then actually healing myself, it won't actually really matter that much. But we are cycling through the passive quite quickly. So we can kill the Harima. Okay, maybe he's actually somewhat impressing me. So what we'll do here, if we had a way to lower his cooldowns, we'd be much better off with his A2 skill. But I don't have a way to do that. If we get lower than 50% HP, we should get a Veil placed on myself, right? HP drops below 50%, so we should be at 50% right now, I believe is what it is. So we just keep spamming the A1 skill, basically. Freya, she can actually smack pretty hard. I'm not going to win this, so there's no reason to really continue, honestly. I could steal those buffs, though. I'll take one of those. Not from UDK. That was the worst idea, actually. Got the provoke. Not a huge deal. But he's just going to sit here. Like, he's just going to keep doing this. Spreading the block actives, the block buffs, everything. So we can keep healing. Going to be a pretty annoying champion to kill. But as far as him actually winning, it's not going to happen. But you got to see a good showcase there of the different effects that Loki brings. So at first, honestly, I was not super excited. I wish we had some more players here to actually test it against. Dang. Like, nobody. It's like 4 players, and I can't go against a lockout. I just got no speed to even answer to that. All right, so the Sify team at the bottom just placed protected block debuffs, and I wasn't able to showcase anything interesting with Loki there. But in the arena, I think earlier mid-game arena, he's going to be pretty solid. He could be a potential speed booster. If they have Stone Skin, he could be placing these skills and just dodging polymorphs, hopefully. It could be a pretty solid champion. If there's not much polymorph, he can be very solid. But if there's a lot of polymorph, he's going to run into some issues. He's going to have some problems. He's going to struggle a little bit. Of course, I mean, he's susceptible to sheep like anybody else is. But if not, then you're going to do pretty solid. This ability is actually extremely strong, and actually stronger than I even realized. And it's going to make climbing Doom Tower fairly easy for a lot of players, especially if you don't have Armons. Now, for the arena, he's not going to be nearly as good as Armons. But when we look at things like the Doom Tower, he's going to be kind of comparable to Armons in some ways, at least in the sense that he's locking out the enemies and then continually spreading those debuffs to keep them locked out. So just only A1s all the time. But in the arena, he's not going to be similar to Armons because Armons is still just absolutely insane. So not that comparable. But here, it's actually relatively comparable. And you can just keep stealing the turn meter, doing the A1, all that kind of good stuff. So we are going to keep these debuffs up, keep them spread, and doing very solid. But guys, that's the Loki showcase. Let me know where you plan on using this dude. Let me know if you're excited for him. Let me know what your opinions are. I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.